Today on Assembly Line, I am joined by Griff Parry and Marek Rubasinski of m3ter. Welcome to Assembly Line, you both.
Welcome. Hello. Thank you. Very nice to meet you.
I'm really excited to get into your story, learn more about the journey of m3ter. But first, before we even dive in there, I want to say congratulations. I know you all recently signed an agreement to be acquired by Salesforce, which just officially went through. So congrats to you and the team.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, it's still within a week. We only closed last Wednesday.
Well, I'm sure a lot of listeners are going to be really interested to hear how that initial partnership came about and how it led to the ultimate acquisition. So yeah, let's just get right into it. Maybe before we talk about the journey that you went down, Griff, you could share a little bit of information for listeners and viewers about what m3ter is, what problems it solves, and who it was built for.
So, m3ter basically solves problems for big enterprises who are moving from simple subscription-based pricing to usage pricing. And the way to think about what m3ter is it's really data infrastructure. So if you move to usage pricing, you need to be able to capture and process usage data, and you need to bring it together with pricing data to work out what goes on the bill. Our customers, generally successful companies, they have entrenched quote to cash tooling, so that they'll use Salesforce on one side, they might use something like NetSuite on the other. But they don't have a capability to do what I just described, that data infrastructure to capture the usage data and process it. So m3ter is a way of basically upgrading your monetization stack for usage pricing in the most painless and quickest way possible.
Very cool. And I know you serve as the company's CEO, and Marek, you're head of EMEA and VP partnerships, which was crucial to y'all's growth and ultimate acquisition, which we'll get into further. But I want to start by going through kind of the founding story. I know, Griff, you started the company with John Griffin in October 2020 through
That's right.
Through AWS, which y'all were a part of from another acquisition. Is that correct?
That's right. So m3ter's got a lot of people who've known each other for a long time. I mean, I've known Marek for over 20 years. Yeah, ages this. But where m3ter came from is where I know Marek from is Sky, and sort of I was really involved in, which is a big pay TV operator, in the UK.
Yes.
And Marek and I were both really involved in that company's response to digital generally. So, which created a lot of opportunities, a lot of threats. And one of the things that we ended up doing was building the online TV capability of the business. So it's a satellite business, but we realized quite early on that television via the internet will be a thing, but we didn't have the technology internally. We knew satellite or broadcast technology. So we appointed a specialist third party. And I know my co-founder, John Griffin, because he was the main salesperson for that company. And then one thing led to another. And then we founded a company called GameSparks, which was essentially a back-end as a service business focused on the video game space. Made sense. We were both of us were sort of exploring certain opportunities in that area, and we sort of spotted an opportunity, and the knowledge that we had from doing online TV was directly applicable.
Mm-hmm.
And we ran that business, and it was pretty successful. And then we sold it to, it was basically a layer on top of AWS, and we were eventually acquired by AWS. And the day we signed the deal, we knew we wanted to do another startup. There was a sense of unfinished business. We wanted to go again. And the problem that we were solving in m3ter was a problem that we had at our old business, GameSparks, and also at AWS when we worked in there in our earnout. So that what both those businesses had in common is that they had usage-based pricing. And we had a bunch of operational and go-to-market pain associated with that pricing model, which at the time we didn't really understand, but we were very aware of the pain. And when we got to AWS, we saw that, they price in a similar way because they're a similar business. They're on a, hugely different scale, but they've got the same problems. And so that's when we started thinking, all right, okay. So if you're going to be doing usage pricing like that, you need to capture the usage data, you need to process it, you need to be able to apply complex rating rules to it and deliver the outputs. And that solves a bunch of problems, not just billing, but also customer experience and sort of pricing agility, etc. And so we knew there was a problem because we'd experienced it firsthand twice, essentially. And so we founded m3ter back end of 2020 to focus on exactly that problem.
Hmm. Yeah. So company's founded October 2020. Marek, I know you joined about a year later in October of
Yep.
21, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
I did
Yep.
know that you all had that shared experience at Sky, so I assumed it was uh, not coincidental
No.
that you joined the team. Um, and then now, could you walk listeners and viewers through what those early days were like? Because I know y'all did go through a fundraising period. I had read that you had a seed round for 17.5 million in 2022. And so I'm curious, in that time period between 2020 and 2022, what were things like inside the company? Were you all honing the product, or were you coming up with strategy?
Um, so I'll tell you what happened, because there were actually multiple steps which are reported as one, but there were several steps
Okay.
in short succession. So we left AWS. We knew we wanted to found another business. We had a good idea about what it was, and it was rooted in our own experiences. So we were pretty persuasive that there was a problem. We knew how to solve it. Um, we raised an initial seed round of about $2.5 million very quickly. It was like, oh, right. Basically based on founder history. But we then raised more money very quickly, remembering that this was an incredibly favorable time for raising money for SaaS businesses, particularly infrastructure-based SaaS businesses. So this was all sort of after COVID. All the SaaS valuations had rocketed. Money was very easy to come by. So we raised $2.5 million in February 21. But we then raised another $10 million about 6 or 7 months later. And that was the reason that happened is one of our early customers raved about what we were doing to his VCs. They stepped forward and said, hey, listen, we'd love to invest based on, what our portfolio company is saying. And we said, well, that sounds fantastic. And then we raised another 5 million about 4 or 5 months later from inside partners. We're a really big multi-stage firm. And the reason that happened is that we came across the person on their platform team who ran their pricing team, basically. And he was really excited by what we were doing because he could see how relevant it was to a really significant proportion of their portfolio companies. So we'd raised that 17.5 million in 3 steps by the end of 21.
Okay, that does make sense now to hear those numbers, because the initial true seed, I guess, was a smaller initial investment. But then you saw the opportunity for, it's a good time to raise, and you had those conversations, so it makes sense that you strike while the iron's hot.
Exactly. And also, but there's a couple of things to add. Is our experience at GameSparks was different. Like it wasn't completely bootstrapped, but there was much more emphasis on generating revenues as quickly as possible and self-funding through a significant part of the journey. And so people wanted, I wanted a different experience. John wanted a different experience. It's like, right, if we can raise money from great VCs, let's do it, because it's sort of an exciting journey. So there was definitely that element to it. But another thing is, we knew we were building critical infrastructure, and we were focusing on enterprise customers. That was our ICP. And we understood that pretty early. And you have to build quite a lot of product to be able to deliver a decent MVP for critical infrastructure for a big buyer like that. So it made sense that we raised a lot of money because we had a lot of building to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That does make sense. So I'd also read a little bit about how VC introductions, like you mentioned, were a core part of your go-to-market early on, and that John had mentioned before some early day struggles from trying to be too much to everyone and getting yourself spread a little thin. So maybe since those VC introductions were so key, I'm wondering if you could maybe share how that came about. I mean, did you intentionally reach out to these VCs, or was it a little bit of luck, or maybe both? That you had that customer rave to their parent VC.
Do you mean about how we raised funding or how we acquired early design partner customers?
both, I think. But I'm specifically, I think the latter.
Um, it wasn't all VCs, so we basically used our network. So it was useful that we had an interesting background. We were an interesting founder team with interesting background, and we're also relatively long in the tooth, so we knew quite a lot of people, and so we're very deliberate about doing a lot of discovery. So although we raised really quite a big chunk of money within a year of getting going, we were holding back on writing code until we fully understood what we wanted to build, and so we did a lot of discovery conversations, and they were pitched as discovery conversations, not with a sale conversation. VCs really contributed to us finding people to talk to, because we'd always say, hey, listen, is there anybody in your portfolio who's got this problem? Would you introduce us? We'd love to do some discovery work with them. But good discovery conversations often lead to good conversations about potentially being a design partner. It's like, if you're really interested in what we're doing, why don't you be one of our early customers? You'd have a lot of influence over the product that we're building. So that's how we acquired that first group of 5 or 6 customers, and that's the nature of it. You have to find a way of getting started. You need those initial customers. I mean, firstly for validation, so that you can go on and sell to others or raise further funding. But you also need the customer to help you design a great product that will work in practice. There's a lot of iteration and learning work to do that, however well the problem space. So that's how we did it.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, it helps to have that network for sure, and those early customers can end up being cheerleaders for you to lead to more customers, right?
It's really, I mean, the other thing to add is there's an element of sort of luck or good fortune, because your early customers are then really influential over the product that you build. So it really helps if you find the right customer who will help you build the right product for the future. And sort of, we could have gone quite different directions in that early phase. Like we could have, if our early customer cohort had been dominated by sort of more engineering oriented teams in earlier stage companies, we might have built something that looked a little bit more like Metronome or Orb, who are major competitors in the area. But the balance of our early customers were the enterprise businesses that I talked about before. So that became our ICP, and it meant that we built something distinctive. I mean, look, these products they all have their similarities, but what m3ter is particularly well designed for is that enterprise customer with enterprise capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So that they are very influential, and luck or judgment, we had good ICP customers that led us in the right direction, helped us build a good product.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So Griff, while you and John are focused on talking to your ICP and these early advisory customers, I know m3ter is one piece of the puzzle, but there's also kind of the revenue engine, the Salesforces, the NetSuites. So Marek, I'm assuming while they're focusing on talking to the customers, you're busy trying to reach out to the Salesforces, the NetSuites to get these partnerships going, right? Because probably a lot of people are right away going to ask for, can this integrate with my existing tool set?
Yeah, no, 100%. Although I've for the last 4 years, I've been at m3ter almost 5. I've been wearing 2 hats. So I've been selling as well, but I've been doing the partnerships. So Griff and John caught me just at the point where they had to start papering those first 1, 2, 3 deals, and so it was a bit of a baptism of fire to come in and do all that. But you're absolutely right. There was a realization super early, just scratching things out on whiteboards and Miro boards, going, "Oh, hang on, this is great. We love what we're doing here, and customers responding really well to the underlying capability and what it's solving for. But really, this product it doesn't function if it's not plugged into some sort of sales front end, at the beginning, and some sort of finance stack at the end. And there's a kind of third axis there. We typically integrate bidirectionally with our customers' other data infrastructure, their data warehouses, or wherever those things are. So with that in mind, two things really then drove the overarching product strategy. And I don't mean from a feature and capability point of view, but kind of big picture, kind of where do we fit in the stack, which I would urge everyone who is maybe more in the B2B space to have that visibility or view of their own business or where they want their business to be. Because I think it's incredibly rare that certainly in software, or actually, to be honest, any technology, that you're not part of an ecosystem. And so we did that kind of analysis, although that's maybe a big word for just constant thinking and iteration about this and having those conversations, and very quickly boiled down the world to, okay, there aren't that many big kind of sales front ends, and there aren't that many big ERPs or sort of finance systems at the back end, and triangulating between where we're strong and where our customers are, and also to Griff's point, those early customers were pretty much all Salesforce and NetSuite customers. So it doesn't take a whole lot of thinking to go, okay, well, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. And they're all asking, or rather telling, well, we need to integrate with Salesforce. Have you got a managed package? No, but we're going to need one. Have you got a native integration with NetSuite? No, but we're going to need one. And so I think, to Griff's point about the competition, very early on, a couple of distinctive ingredients in the overall product strategy, one of which is integrations, and being almost integrations first, because it meets us in the middle. It solves for the messy middle, but really it's not trying to take over from other systems. So we had to think about the ecosystem, and I think that's good advice for any founder or anyone working with founders or early stage businesses, is think about how they sit in amongst the ecosystem and what they have to talk to. And then on the Salesforce thing specifically, people were saying, well, I take this, but really need to know more about how you're going to integrate with Salesforce. And so there was a very rapid learning and upskilling of, you can go online and sign up, and you get your login and your dev org, and then the partner account manager reaches out to you and you start that conversation. But it had to ramp really quickly. It's because building a good Salesforce integration managed package, it's now gone headless, obviously. So, there's even more opportunities to work with the Salesforce platform. It takes time. You need to have the commercial discussions. You need to have the engineering and product discussions. And you've got to get good, you got to really iterate those things. So yeah, absolutely. Very early on, realized that we needed to be integration first, partnership first in our approach.
And did you or anyone else on the m3ter team already have connections or a network with Salesforce that helped with those early days of the partnership?
Just a tiny thread to pull on. So a couple of connections. I think, Griff, if I remember rightly, it was via one of our VCs. I think we had at least a tiny bit of a thread to pull on, where it wasn't just filling in an online form. You could reach out and have a sidebar conversation. And actually, one of our other very early colleagues, who was ex Zuora and ex, I think, Oracle and other kind of similar businesses. He knew someone who was now in a relevant team at Salesforce for whom this would be interesting, i.e. we'd be solving a gap for them on that platform. And it was really those two things that helped us, kind of help accelerate that, which is sort of terrible advice, because it's basically saying get lucky and have a connection, which is not great, which is not great,
but it's
advice.
True.
I was going to emphasize we didn't have any special advantages. We were hustling.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
we found ways of getting in.
Yeah, smart. Well, I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say hustle. It would be the advice. Even if it's a third connection twice removed on LinkedIn, and we were doing a lot of that. We were doing, hey, turns out that you once played netball with my friend John. Do you want to talk about billing and Salesforce? We were doing a lot of that.
Nice. I did also notice, and perhaps this is coincidental, given Salesforce's size. I did notice a few members of the current and prior marketing team at m3ter seemed to be some folks that came from Salesforce,
But
and
yeah,
I saw that. And I wondered, well, is this strategic? Were you all playing 4D chess while some of us are just playing checkers here?
are we honest here? Yeah, of course we were playing 5-dimensional chess. No, that was a complete coincidence. So yes, our two, I guess our two key marketing people were both from Salesforce, but it was more. So Kelly Singsank was our head of marketing, or our marketing leader, and she joined the business quite early. And she was talked about in the VC networks as being someone who's really good, wants to get back into sort of like smaller companies to build things up. I mean, what impressed us most about her is that she's really good and really nice. But it was a nice additional benefit that she understood the Salesforce ecosystem, which we knew was going to be important to us. It did make a difference on the margin for sure, but we weren't really playing 3D chess.
Okay, so the App Exchange listing, the Salesforce connector, I noted went through that the security review, the dreaded security review that everyone fears, late 2023, I believe October 23, and then the listing went live later in 2024. Things seem to accelerate very, very quickly from there. At least in hindsight, it always seems that way. Because I noticed that in March of this year, so not even 2 years later, m3ter had an expanded integration to better support Revenue Cloud, aka Agentforce Revenue Management.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, things did move pretty quickly. I mean, as Marek said, like we knew that embedding ourselves in the partner ecosystem was key, and Salesforce were absolutely at the top of the list of people we needed to find a way of working with. And what it meant is that we were present and front of mind. But the pull for the partnership was actually from them rather than us, because they could see that there were trends in the way software pricing and high-tech pricing more generally was going, where there was more and more usage. And there was something that their customers needed to make it work. And so they wanted to find a partner or trusted partners that they could introduce the customers to. So there was a pull. So we were around, and we were front of mind because of the work that we'd done, the time we'd invested in the partnership. But then they pulled us in, and that's one thing led to another, and eventually they acquired us, and along the way they formally partnered with us and they invested in us. So yeah, it was the result we were hoping and planning for. But yeah,
that's what I was going to ask. If this was all part of the hope was an eventual acquisition, specifically a Salesforce acquisition, because there was that strategic investment March of this year. Just 3 months later, in June, you signed the definitive agreement to be acquired, right?
Yes, yeah. So I would say it wasn't necessarily specifically Salesforce, but we knew that the ecosystem, we played a certain role, and our customers had tooling that they were absolutely committed to. They needed to make work with m3ter. So our likely exits were with those tooling on either side. So it could have been Salesforce, it could have been another sales CRM, it could have been an ERP on the other side. But it was those ecosystem players that we'd spent a lot of time sort of building integrations for. And it's can I just flag one other thing, which sort of explains what our connector was for and why the integrations matter. So I talked about m3ter doing two things. We really do three. So the two that we obviously do is that we meter and we rate. So the metering is capturing processing usage data. Rating is the application of complex pricing and billing logic to that usage data to work out what goes on the bill. But the third thing we do is that we automate data flows across the quote to cash stack. So we make it much easier for people to do things with much less manual intervention and manual based processes. And the reason that the connector was important to us is that if there is pricing logic captured in the CRM, you want that to be automatically moved into the bill calculation mechanism provided by m3ter. And then once m3ter calculates what's on the bill, it'll deliver that downstream to the invoicing system. But it'll also your customers also want that information delivered back into Salesforce, so account managers can see, what the billing of a particular customer is, what the usage of a particular customer is, and the connector was designed to automate those flows, pricing data in, and usage summaries and billing data back into Salesforce. So that's what its role was.
Yeah, but
Very
Scott,
cool.
to your point about what was it always the plan? Like Griff said, no, but we did specifically identify and move into white space with this. So if you at the time when we were making the decisions and placing the bets, you've got limited resources. What do you put an entire kind of 2+1 engineering team on to develop? Standard wisdom would suggest, well, this is not the time to invest in a really complex enterprise grade native connector, to your point, that has to pass through a stringent security review, which can sometimes be a little bit opaque and difficult to navigate. And you have to learn a whole new language and a whole new kind of engineering framework to do that. But we placed that bet because when we looked around, our zag when other people zig. The competition was not doing that. They were saying, "Oh, just sort yourself out. We got an API. You can integrate that." But that it became a differentiator for us. And once we were, to your point, the time that we spent developing it and launching it, once you're out of the gate and you're a year or 18 months ahead, and then you're iterating every 8 to 12 weeks, releasing a new version, it can be hard to catch up, and that's part of what's played into the end of the journey. So yeah, some specific bets were placed, but one of them was just identifying that, whether it's the ISV, Salesforce App Exchange ISV ecosystem, or another one that people are thinking about and founders and early stage teams are thinking about, just avoid crowded spaces. Look where people haven't kind of exploited a gap, and this was part of exploiting a gap.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned obviously that you placed your bets. Clearly, this one paid off well. I'm curious though. I think success sometimes can pave over prior failures, and people forget that there was a journey that m3ter went on to get here. So I'm curious if either you could expand on any bets you placed that didn't go your way, or some lessons learned that you had along the way, some hypotheses you maybe had that didn't turn out to be correct.
I've got two, Marek. And so
Yeah.
why don't I talk through those, and then you can tell me what else. So I was going to talk about ICP and surface area were going to be the two that I
was going to talk about a prior, obviously, without mentioning any names, there was a U-turn partnership that didn't work out. So right macro strategy, tactically an error linked to the ICP.
That was what I was going to talk about.
I was going to talk about pricing as well.
Okay, so let's do those three. You start with the ICP stroke failed partnership.
Okay, so we had a previous strategic partnership, which was, at a macro level, the same right idea, where we were complementary. We didn't do what they did; they didn't really do what we did. A mixture of the two should solve our customers' problems. But we were just didn't pay enough attention to ICP fit, and they are more high volume, sort of more in the SMB space, and just as our product was diverging to be, because these things, to your point, take time and there are bumps in the road, and you do zigzag a little bit, but by this time, with the benefit of hindsight, we were clearly moving towards a product and a platform more suitable for large enterprises. sort of 50, 100 million, 200 million up all the way into the billions in terms of revenues, much less applicable to sort of SMBs or even businesses that are the more in the single or tens of millions of revenue. And that's a real flip between, as you know, there's a real flip between what businesses at those stages need, and some never get beyond that stage. And so we spent too long working on that partnership, and by the time it went live, our product was already going here, their product's here, so constantly diverging and trying to bridge the two, both in terms of go-to-market and product integration, it just didn't work. And eventually, we just had to kind of pull apart, terminate the partnership. It was broadly amicable. It didn't work out, but we wasted time and money, and there's no two ways around that. And I suppose linked into that, because as a consequence of being in that partnership and trying to make it work, because obviously you invest, you try and make these things work, and it's a bit of time before you realize they may not, and you have to take the hard decisions. We're now pricing 10x what we were pricing for some of those deals, maybe 20x in some instances. So we were hugely undervaluing our product and the benefit that it brings because of that poor ICP fit. In terms of at its most basic, there are lots of reasons, but I think generally all startups, price too low to begin with. That is the nature. You're desperate for someone to buy, so what do? You go out low, and it's a brave. OpenAI have done it. They went out at 200 quid for something that Sam Altman said, "Yeah, I just kind of guessed 200 quid." Turns out it's costing us 500 a month to deliver.
I knew they were subsidizing. I didn't know that it was such a finger to the wind calculation, but
I think it's famous. There's a famous tweet or X post. You can look it up. Someone said, "Oh, I bet they did a lot of work on this." And literally, Sam Altman comes in on a DM, reply says, "No, I just kind of guessed it because it was on me. I was wrong." Yeah.
So, and I'll chuck in a couple. So I'm not sure whether this is one big error, but it was definitely a learning process. It's not enough to win the customer. They say yes and they sign. That's great. What really matters, particularly in your early stages, is you want them to activate successfully. So the finish line is, you could either describe it the finish line or the start line, but where you really need to get them is that they're using your product in production and they're getting the value and impact that they expected and wanted from it. And particularly in the early stages, you need to provide the customers with a lot of support because this is all unfamiliar for them. And, there was a constant course correction about how much support we provide, how much we would define exit criteria, how much we would charge. Because, to start with, you say yes to everything and you generally don't charge because the key thing is to get the customer and get them live. And then over time, you learn that actually you've got to create more of a framework and discipline around it. And then you realize that if you're going to scale the business, you can't be providing that support as m3ter. You need to foster a different type of partner, the consulting partner or SI partner ecosystem to do that work. So there was lots of learnings all the way through, and there were sort of pain points associated with either getting things wrong or not changing and moving fast enough. So that was one area. And then my fourth one is we definitely tried to do too much. There was too much surface area for the product. And it's not apparent now, but absolutely what we were focused on in the early stages of m3ter is we wanted to provide that m3ter rating and workflow automation tool. That's core m3ter. But then we also wanted to use the data that collected to deliver advanced analytics back to our customers, particularly focused around usage forecasting. Because if you're doing usage forecasting, you can do revenue forecasting and you can do pricing recommendation or pricing optimization. And we spent a lot of time and money working on that second part of their business, which we call decisioning. I still absolutely believe in it. I think it's a huge opportunity area for Salesforce. Now we're part of Salesforce, but we were trying to do too much all at once, and we should have been trying to do those things in series rather than in parallel. We should have been focusing our resources on winning in the metering and rating space before we expended significant time and effort on the decisioning space. And if I could do it all over again, that's what I would have done rather than trying to do those things in parallel. And just one final comment, it was slightly a function of the funding environment that we were born into, because we could raise a lot of money easily, and that encourages you to try to be more ambitious in terms of what you're building. But if I could have a conversation now with my past self, I'd say to him, stick to the knitting. Like narrow your focus, make sure you win here, and that earns you the right to go on to do the next thing. If you try and do too much, you'll be wasteful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You mentioned how your network was so key in those early days, and that you tapped into that to find customers, make introductions, etc. You also talked about how hard y'all were hustling. And I'm curious, for anyone listening right now that maybe is earlier in their career and so doesn't have quite that network built up yet, or doesn't have a Marek on the team and is struggling to figure out partnerships and figure out how to get those first 10 customers. Do you have any advice on the hustling side?
I mean, listen, it definitely helps to sort of be a little bit older as a founder and to have those existing networks. It definitely means that, someone's thumb is on the scale a little bit. But hustling is just something that startups do. So yeah, it's slightly more difficult if you don't have the network, but it doesn't mean that you can't do it. It's the key thing is energy and iteration. Like you'll have conversations with people, or they will entertain conversations with you if what you're saying resonates, if you clearly understand a problem that they recognize themselves as having. And so, yeah, I wouldn't discourage anybody. It's like, okay, so you don't have it, you can still hustle your way into a position, and then, people have worked hard, and opportunities gets presented because of the effort and the elbow grease that you've put in. So yeah, it's not an insurmountable obstacle.
A lot of people will give you the time of day if you start by not selling and just doing that thing of genuinely asking them, have you got this problem, especially if they're ex-founders themselves. So if you really have no network, then if you start with either exited or multiple founders who are still operational, maybe they've got the next thing they're building or the next thing, if you ask enough times, someone will say, sure, I'll give you half an hour just to kind of listen to the thing and maybe just give you some advice. If you do enough of those, to Griff's point from those early conversations, maybe one or two will say, you know what, I'll give that a go. When you've got some sort of jury-rigged MVP, I'll give it a try and I'll give you some feedback and just see if you can expand that out.
I've had guests on the show before come on and praise a book called The Mom Test. That specifically, I'm not sure if y'all have read it, but it specifically talks about these early day discovery calls and the importance of essentially not leading the witness, not talking too much about your idea for a product, and not getting too salesy, like you're saying, Marek, and instead really truly trying to listen to them about the problems they have, how they, how big of a problem it is, so you can know whether or not actually it's something people are willing to pay for, as well as what they're doing currently to solve it.
That really resonates with me. I haven't read the book. I'm guessing the mum test is also partly, can you explain it to your mum?
I think so. I must admit I haven't read it yet either. I got to pick up a copy, but
I mean, the way I think about it is, somebody is giving you their time. That's really valuable. Everyone's busy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, don't talk at them. Like, the benefit you'll get is listening to what they have to say. So obviously you have to frame it and you have to provide some kind of prompt that gets them talking. But I think that the advice about listening more than talking is absolutely spot on.
I want to talk a little bit about the acquisition. So I think a lot of viewers and listeners are earlier stage, and they kind of view that as the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that they're looking forward to. And I'm curious if you could share, first off, how you knew that it was the right time because I think, again, talking about hindsight versus reality, people forget that the fog of war is always obscuring things, and it's difficult to know when the right time is to sell a business. But I'm curious also if you could walk through how the acquisition went. I know Salesforce had become an investor at least in March of 2026, if not sooner. But I'm curious how the conversations went, how that whole journey went for m3ter and the team.
Key thing to say is that we didn't overthink it.
Okay.
We were in a fortunate position where they wanted to partner closely with us. And so we just focused on being the best partner we possibly could. Eager to get more exposure to their teams, understand, what problems they were seeing in the market, understanding what, how a great partner would behave, what product a great partner would be building. And so that was our focus. And acquisition conversations sort of naturally flow from that. So that would, it's no more complicated. It's like if you're lucky enough to sort of get in a situation where they want to work with you and want to partner with you, just don't overcomplicate it. Just be a really great partner and then see what happens. Marek, anything to add to that? I mean, you were very involved through this period.
No, I think that's right. I mean, it obviously doesn't hurt if they have a ventures arm or they do some off balance sheet investing from a CVC or even just directly. Be honest about where you are if you're looking for funding, because that sends up a signal. But yeah, to Griff's point, just focusing on being the most useful thing. Yeah, back to that point about finding the gap and moving into any empty spaces. And that if you are also talking to the customers of potential acquirers, you will learn very quickly where they maybe have frustrations or pain points that you could help with, and do the best you can helping with those, both in go to market and in your product strategy, and then see where that leads you. Because even if it doesn't lead to investment or an acquisition, you've got a whole ecosystem of people who are interested in buying your product because it solves a problem.
Well, speaking of solving problems, I personally am excited about the m3ter acquisition because I'm hopeful for what it could mean for Salesforce ISVs. I know that one issue that some ISVs have run into in the past, that have a business that lends itself very well to usage-based pricing, have had difficulties building a Salesforce plugin and offering that to customers, mostly due to technical issues kind of on the Salesforce side of how ISV partnerships work. Do you all foresee m3ter helping alleviate those troubles for ISVs down the road?
I was going to say simple yes.
Absolutely. I mean, we're excited to help not just Revenue Cloud's customers, but also Salesforce internally. I mean, it's a huge and really deep and wide product suite now. With the headless strategy, it's increasingly composable. So you can pick the components and connect them how you want. So both for in-house use, but also to your point about exposing that capability into the marketplace to allow more flexibility for usage-based pricing. There's so many opportunities to help, and I guarantee you we will be getting to all of them in due course. I mean, it's a similar situation. You may have listeners and or friends that list on, say, AWS Marketplace or Azure Marketplace, and they have their own limitations. So yeah, we're excited to help across the board.
Cool, and it's a good space to be in. I know, Salesforce, whether true or not, they're often coined as the creators of SaaS and the first creators of a kind of a seat-based pricing model for software. And even they obviously in recent years have moved toward usage-based pricing with their flex credits for Agent Force, and AI and LLMs in general have just brought this real need in the market for usage-based pricing.
Yeah, it's definitely true. I mean, in the early days of the company, we were saying, look, there is a trend towards usage. This creates a need that m3ter meets. But it was quite hard because people were like, what do you mean usage pricing? Like no one saw it happening. And the thing that really changed for our business is AI, basically, because the likely pricing model for AI is usage based because of the underlying cost base of AI features. They drive variable costs, and that means that people lean towards some kind of usage pricing to give them more control over their margins. And so we don't need to explain it to anybody anymore. It's like, yeah, usage pricing is a thing, and people are like, yeah, we know. We see it everywhere. It's not just in the AI world, but we understand it because of the trends that are happening there. So yeah, life is easier now.
It's funny you should say that, because I was just thinking about it. 4 years ago, like you say, you had to explain what are you doing and why do you want to talk to me? I think the last 20 customer calls I've been on have opened like this, almost verbatim, like they're reading a script. Well, we're launching an AI product or a MCP server, insert, choose as applicable, and we need to sort out the billing. That's literally just the opening of the call. And then there's a pause. And then I always ask, when were you hoping to go live? And depending on whether they say a number in weeks or months is how much of a code red that the rest of the call is. Yeah.
It's worth adding another thing is that there are for m3ter, there are two pennies that need to drop with the customer. So the first penny is, I understand that I want to do usage pricing. But the other penny that needs to drop is, operationally, this is really complex. And this is more than just about billing. This is also fundamentally about eliminating revenue leakage, delivering good customer experiences, unblocking product and sales. So the reality of pricing is it's 50% strategy and 50% operations. And we need people to understand that second 50% operations bit, the 50% that's operations. So that's what we're looking for. If somebody understands that they want to do usage-based pricing, or they do it, and two, operationally it's complex to do and they need to set up their systems and processes in the right way, then we know we're in a good spot.
Sure. Well, it's nice to be in a space where the best ideas always seem obvious in hindsight, right? So it's nice to be in a space now like usage-based pricing where y'all were ahead of the curve in realizing that this is the way the world was going, especially SaaS. So that's great. This feels like a good place to wrap, but before we do, is there anything else y'all like to share with listeners and viewers out there for advice on their own journey, entrepreneurial journey?
I mean, from my point of view, like I obviously like early stage businesses. I've done two of them. I like them because you feel alive every day and you have agency, and I like the ambiguity. You're working things out. I mean, the one thing I'd say to other people who are founders or thinking about being one is, persistence and sweat count for an awful lot. And so, it might be 10% genius or inspiration, but 90% perspiration. You just need to be somebody who keeps cranking the handle. And like, hopefully, you've got a good idea, which is setting you in the right direction. But the key thing is to learn and adapt and keep doing that. And if you enjoy that process, then early stage businesses are brilliant. If you don't like it, then you probably shouldn't be doing early stage business.
Very nice. Well, I appreciate both y'all coming on. Griff and Marek, if folks want to learn more about you or m3ter or the recent acquisition of the team into the Salesforce family, where can they go to do that?
For me, you can go to my LinkedIn, which is Griff and Parry, or you can go to our website, which is m3ter.com, m3ter. And Marek, what about you?
Oh, same. You can look me up on LinkedIn. I've got a pretty good track record of answering messages, so feel free.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much again for joining AppSimile Line. Congratulations on the acquisition, and looking forward to leveraging m3ter down the road through Salesforce's various products.
Cool. Thank you very much for having us on, Scott.
All right. Take
Cheers.
care. Thanks a
Bye.
lot. Bye.